Hey everybody, before we get into this week's episode, a few housekeeping notes. We come out every other Thursday. Please follow us on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts. 5 stars only, just like the movie we're about to cover is a 5-star movie. You can follow us on Instagram at Read Watch Play Podcast, or you can email us at readwatchplay@gmail.com. If you do want to write in about the episode, the next one we'll be recording is Nosferatu, the recent release, so check that out. This is Nick's B-Day episode, so be sure to wish him a happy birthday, even though I think he hates me, as he suggested this. On with the show.
You're impossibly fast and strong. You gotta give me some answers.
I'd rather hear your theories.
I have considered radioactive spiders and kryptonite.
It's all superhero stuff, right? What if I'm not the hero? What if I'm the bad guy?
Welcome to Read, Watch, Play, your dive into, I guess, stories and how they're adapted. I'll leave the how that we love out of this one, Randy. We are coming to you live from Forks, Washington, and this is episode 31, where we are covering a story that people really sank their teeth into. That's right, we're covering 2008's Twilight. My name is Nick Hinkson. I'm here with the Jacob to my Edward, Randy Berridge. Here we go.
Yeah. So, Jacob to your Edward. I think that means we hate each other.
Yeah, I figured we'd be fighting after making you read this.
Yeah, I did like the, sank our teeth into it. That was nice.
I thought you would appreciate that.
So it's your B-Day episode. Why Twilight?
A couple reasons. So, first and foremost, when I think of genres of books that Randy loves, the first thing I think of is romantasy. Just over the top romance and fantasy put together. Sounds like your favorite.
Is that a real genre, romantasy?
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
It's actually quite a large genre, and I have some thoughts about that I'll get into in a minute, but that was the first reason. This also has been requested by 2 separate listeners, so I thought, why not take on this one and really let Randy let his anger flag fly. Yeah. It's,
I guess for context for people, what we do for our birthday, and by what we do, this is the first time we're doing it, but it's what we're going to do. Whoever's birthday it is, they have full privilege to do any episode they like. Neither of us have any veto power. So we just have to do it. Nick chose Twilight, so here we are. Do you want me to give you some synopsis of the story?
Yeah, hit us with the synopsis, and then actually, before we jump into it after that, I have to give you my least favorite intros that you've given me over the past year.
Yeah, why don't let's just do the least favorite intros first, and then we can jump into the synopsis. How about that?
Yeah, I'm going to come in hot. When we did American Psycho, you said you wanted to shoot me in the face and dissolve me in acid, and that one was a little bit rough.
That was probably the most blatantly, violent one I've put towards you.
Yeah.
For context too, I think was that the bonus episode we did for our favorites of the year? Someone had written in asking what were the most offensive things I said to you.
Yeah,
I think it was that one, right?
His Logan.
Yeah. So Nick said he would come back with his top 3.
Yeah. That's probably number 1 on the list. Number 2 on my list is a tie between, for Super Mario Brothers, you called me a Goomba, which I feel like is really offensive.
Like the lowliest of the low henchmen.
And then in A Haunting in Venice, you said I had a giraffe frame. And that one stung a little bit too.
Yeah.
I'm sitting here looking at my neck every time we do one of these episodes now.
Self-conscious now.
And then the third place is also a tie between A Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes and A Hunger Games, where you have called me both Lucky and Caesar Flickerman, who are both abhorrent people.
Yeah. I don't know, man. That's one where it's a little tough, because are they good people? No. Do they have the Riz? I think they do. They have great, kind of charisma on the mic. So I thought that was a compliment.
But
yeah, you're a little more self-aware than the Flickermans. I'll give you that.
Oh, I appreciate that. I hope so.
That was good. Well, I was expecting something way worse than Jacob, but I'll take it. I thought I was not going to be getting out of here without a scratch on my face.
I almost bit your head off with this one, pun intended, but
Yeah.
But I decided I'd go easy here. I wrote a lot of them.
Yeah.
And I'm going to keep them in the back pocket for when I need them.
Love it. Well, synopsis of Twilight, what we're discussing today. Twilight tells the story of high school teen Bella Swan, who moves from Phoenix, Arizona to Forks, Washington to live with her father in the town she hated as a child. As the new girl in school, Bella makes fast friends and catches the eyes of seemingly every boy in the school except for one, the sullen, pale, and exceptionally attractive Edward Cullen. However, to Bella's surprise, Edward is hiding not only his deep affection for her, but his darkest secret, that he and his family are vampires. As the secret unravels, can Edward keep Bella safe from not only herself, but from the other vampire clans that are out for blood? That is the story of Twilight. As best
Did you
as
write
I
that
could,
one?
I did.
That's a good one.
Yeah, I mean, I stumbled over. I couldn't say the words father, but that's all right.
Yeah, well,
I got through it at the end of the day.
I get to read it, so I get to, see what it was supposed to sound like. But I guess on that note, Randy, is this the best book we've covered so far?
It's not the worst, that's for sure. It's definitely, honestly, better than Argyle. And one that we've never covered. We're going to have to retire the Argyle bit at some point.
No.
But I even liked it more than Daisy Jones and the Six, which we didn't cover. But
that is shocking. And also, we need to find time to cover that. We put the work in. We might as well cover it.
I know. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely in the category of, I think a recurring theme through this podcast is it's so bad it's good. And you just can't look away. Book and movie. And you're kind of just giggling. So is it the best book we've covered? No. Did I have fun with this? You bet your ass I had fun with this.
Can I read some of the texts that you sent me regarding this book?
Yeah.
All right, let me pull these up.
Yeah. Bring up the receipts here.
Okay, here we go. Out of the blue, on Tuesday, December 10th, I get a text saying, Chapter 4 of Twilight may be one of the most excruciating things I've ever read. Then 8 hours later, I get, scratch that. Chapter 5 is worse.
Yeah.
And it's just Schmidt going, and rolling his whole body.
I thought we hit sort of the cavern of my enjoyment. Little did I know, there was a trapdoor in that cavern. And I sunk lower.
You did. And then I'm trying to find the ones you sent me about them. Yeah, and then you texted me about how much you love this movie.
Yeah. Yeah, I watched the movie for the first time. I mean, we're recording this on Sunday. I watched the movie for the first time ever yesterday. And if I'm not mistaken, this is your first read. And it was your first movie watch as well.
Yes.
How does this rank for you in the pantheon of the great adaptations that we have covered?
Pretty high because it was a lot of fun. To your point, it wasn't intentionally funny, but I was laughing the entire time. I was laughing the entire time I read the book because I was thinking about you reading it and I could picture how mad you were getting. And then I was laughing the entire time at the movie because it was so unintentionally funny that I had a genuinely good time watching it.
I do.
It's also,
sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. I was gonna say it's just super faithful to the source material. Also,
it is.
We'll get into that when we talk about the movie, but it's beat for beat a remake.
Yeah, I mean, and I do want to clear the air. I wouldn't even say I'm a closet. Not in the book world, but in the movie world, I love a rom-com. I'm a big rom-com guy. Just watched The Holiday the other day. Loved it. Had an absolute blast. That is, I mean, I know you like Jude Law. That is Jude Law on another level in The Holiday.
Jude Law's always on that level. You take that back.
It's like he's trying to sleep with literally every person, not even in the cast, but also at home, just sitting there. I'm like, is Jude Law trying to fuck me right now? So that's kind of what I feel like. But But I love a rom-com. But I can't say I'm experienced in the romance world in my reading. This might have been my first.
And not only that, it's romantasy. So
Yeah.
not only do you have the bread and butter romance, but you got the fantasy elements too.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about the fantasy aspect of this a little bit? Because I know you had some thoughts, not like deep into the book, but at least some high level meta thoughts on how this fits into the world of fantasy.
Yeah. So to any fantasy fans that may be listening to this podcast, this message is for you. There's absolutely a place for romance in the fantasy genre, but it gets a lot of hate, Randy. It does.
Totally.
Like, it's fantasy fans, for whatever reason, and not all, but enough, like to gatekeep fantasy and keep this romantasy genre out and belittle people who like Twilight, A Court of Thorns and Roses, Fourth Wing, insert any of the other super
Colleen
popular
Hoover.
ones. Yeah. And you need to sit down and shut the fuck up because like I don't understand why if somebody's getting into fantasy and Twilight is their introduction or one of those other titles is their introduction, you wouldn't say, oh, I'm glad you like fantasy. Here's some other places you can go with it. And maybe that's the time that you can recommend authors you like or just more romantasy books, because I think that there is room in this genre for all of those authors to be successful. And the more people that get into fantasy, the more space there will be for new authors to come into the genre who might write something you like. So it boggles my mind that in 2024, almost 2025, we're still gatekeeping a genre of book. And then this is crazy too. Like it's so bad that so Brandon Sanderson is probably the biggest writer in fantasy right now.
Yeah.
To the point where the sixth book in one of his sixth book, whatever, was in one of his series was coming out, that there was a whole convention, Randy, for just this one book. And in his speech about, the book coming out and getting everybody hyped, he took time to stop and have the same conversation.
Yeah.
And that is wild that needs to happen. So, I'll get off my soapbox now, but it's something that really bothers me. And I think it's awful and there's no place for it.
Yeah, I agree. I just don't understand why people put so much energy into like hating on what other people like. It's just like what you like, who cares what other people enjoy? I mean, this is no different to me. This is a weird comp. But the experience I had reading this was I was thinking about when I was on an airplane earlier this year and I watched the movie The Beekeeper with Jason Statham. And I'm like, that's my comfort food. And like, is it a great movie? Absolutely not. But do I like to see Jason Statham doing his thing, going on a tour of vengeance, killing people? Yes, like it just brings me joy and fun. And nobody looks down on me for that. Maybe some people do. So like, why do I care about a book or a genre that brings other people comfort that they just like to, they're not going here for life lessons. They're going here to just like escape from the world a little bit. And that's what I do with The Beekeeper. So like, who cares?
I'm with you. I've never seen The Beekeeper. I'll add it to my list.
Yeah, it's fun.
It's just classic Jason Statham being Jason Statham in a movie.
Yeah, I mean, the setup is a old woman on a sort of I think it's a kind of a farm that he lives on, is duped by one of those scams, phone call scams, and gets her life savings stolen. And she kills herself because she's like so devastated about it. Jason Statham goes ham on the people who did this. And one of them is Josh Hutcherson from Hunger Games.
Oh.
Yeah, he's really good in it. But it's just like good fun. Watch it on an airplane. That's the only time I'd watch it. It's perfect for that. But I agree, kind of bringing it back to your message. Like, I don't know. It's just like, it doesn't affect your life at all what people enjoy. And like, unless this is like actively harming someone, like who cares? Just who cares? Like, let people like what they like.
Yeah. The only thing harmed in the making of this book was one vampire.
Who was that?
The
end.
guy at the end that was
The guy at
hunting
the end.
Bella.
Okay, yeah. Spoiler alert. Wow, jeez. Do you want to hit me with the pew pew, some rapid fires?
Yeah,
We can just get into it.
Number one, how quickly did you buy the second book? I mean, I know you need to know what happens here.
You know, this is the sick, twisted thing about this series is like, I gotta be honest, I kind of want to know what happens next. Like, I kind of want to know how much more ridiculous this gets. And even just reading some comments online, just doing some of my Redditing, you know, it just gets even zanier. The general consensus is like 1 and 2 are kind of like pretty good fun. After that, it's kind of loses a little bit of its campy fun and is just pure bad. So I'm kind of interested in what happens next.
Would you watch the movie or read the book if you wanted to know what happened next?
I don't think I can read this again. I think I'd probably watch the movie.
That's fair.
Yeah. What about you? Have you done any looking up what's to come?
Yeah. Oh, I know exactly how I was the same way as you. I needed to know what happened next.
I was like, where's this going?
I just read like plot synopsis of books 2 and 3.
Yeah. And I'm going to be honest, man, I finished it and I was thinking, I'm like, does she eventually become a vampire? Like, I kind of want to know.
I won't spoil it for you. I will say that according to Google and all of the, Charlie remains in the dark about all of this stuff happening in Forks until the very end of book 3.
I love that. What an awful police officer. Like literally in his own home. But hey, can't see the forest through the trees. Happens. I have one for you here. I think I put this one in here.
Okay.
Gotta know. Are you Team Edward, Team Jacob? I remember this being part of the phenomenon, the big question of the time.
That's a good one. It's a little early because I haven't watched the other movies yet. But for right now, I'm Team Edward. Which I think you're supposed to be at the end of book 1. And I think book 2 is where you have to start picking a side. It's my understanding.
Yeah, I think I was pretty shocked when I was reading this because I thought Jacob was going to be a more prominent figure. And he's not in book 1. He definitely seems way more normal than Edward. That's for sure. But yeah, I like Pattinson, so I'll stay Team Edward.
Yeah, I think, and this is based on Google, not reading, haven't talked to anybody, but in book 1, Edward was mostly there for like agency purposes, to give you the lore, to move the story forward, and to set up that battle going forward.
Yeah.
But then Stephanie Meyer and her publisher liked that character, so they changed how they were going to do books 2 and 3 to include him.
Yeah.
And make it what it ultimately became.
Can't have a love triangle unless you got a third person.
Exactly.
And you know I love a love triangle.
I've always said it. If Randy loves one thing in this world, it's a love triangle. I've always said it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a tale as old as time. I mean, it's just a way to lock me in.
But anyway, that's a long way of saying I think that you're not supposed to have to pick a side until book 2.
Yeah, that checks out.
Second question. Have you ever dated someone 81 years younger than you?
No. As a 33-year-old, I have not. Dude, you're kind of 1-2 punch here in these questions you have. It's just like, this was tough. Reading this. I mean, I think we're going to talk a little bit more about this later. I'm going to hold it at the pew pew. But no, Nick, I haven't ventured it. Check in with me in another 80 years and we'll see. Who knows? Yeah.
And then, have you ever broken into someone's house to watch them sleep?
I honestly don't know what was. I don't know what's tougher, the age gap or the sleeping stuff. I think that was the chapter. Maybe I texted you, and I was like, "Just stop, please stop." It was probably around this point that I was like, you know what? I'm just going audiobook only for this because I don't have the energy to actually use my eyes to read this. I'm just listening.
What did you think of the audiobook?
I mean, it was terrible.
Production value.
Not good. We got no voices out of my audio narrator. It was all just the same voice the whole time. And I like a little bit of verve when someone reads to me. I like a little bit of voice work. And but it fits. It's as cardboard as the characters in this story. So it checked out.
Okay.
Yeah. Did you like the audiobook? What speed were you cranking on by the end?
I started and finished at 1.8.
Damn. They sound like minions when they do it. Like that feels fast. I got to work up.
Yeah. If I were you, I would jump to 1.2 speed next time you're listening to an audiobook, and it will take you a chapter or two to adjust, but then you'll realize you're listening to it at the speed you would read it, and it makes it A lot faster, and B, it kind of makes more sense, and it reduces a lot of like weird pauses for dialogue, like in between dialogue. And then should you decide that you enjoy that, I slowly worked my way up over the course of the last year. I went from 1.2 to 1.8. And I usually start around 1.5 with the new book till I get a hang of the narrator, and then I go back up.
Yeah, I finished at 1.5. I felt like I was sprinting a marathon, which kind of was my intention. Anything else any other pew-pews you got?
No, I really just wanted to pry into your dating history there.
Yeah. I mean, check in again. Who knows? Maybe it'll happen.
Yeah, I'll ask you when we're old and decrepit.
I'll just quick hit, only 2 notes here, just for context for the book as we get into it. This came out in 2005. Like you said, this is part of the romantasy genre, which I did not know had its own term. It's a young adult. Would you say it's a young adult romantasy?
Yeah, I would.
And it's the first novel by author Stephanie Meyer as part of the Twilight saga. I think she's written a few other things. I've heard she's written a book from Edward's perspective, which I've heard is just a slog. But I think she's done this whole series, and I think she's maybe done like 2 or 3 others, like The Host, and there's something else. I don't know. Midnight Sun, I believe. But that's a little bit of background. Do you have memories of this blowing up back in the day?
I literally have none. Like, I remember it being a thing while we were in high school.
Yeah.
But I didn't read it. I never watched it. And the mania behind this lived outside of my little bubble.
But you knew it was going on.
Yeah. I mean, you couldn't, if you grew up in the mid 2000s like we did, the 1990s and the mid 2000s, there are certain things that you could not get away from at least knowing existed. And Twilight was one of them.
Yeah. And what's weird is like, I don't remember having friends or people that I was close with, or even just in school, that like were reading it. Like, I feel like I knew that there were people that did, but I didn't know anyone who was actively reading it. My main context for it came from, I mentioned this on the Harry Potter podcast. Like, I started listening to Harry Potter podcasts in the early 2000s. I think like it came out in like 2004, a year before this. And like the Twilight was like a big deal because it was the first thing to come out as Harry Potter was wrapping up that was like, could this be the next big one? And I think there was a little bit of gatekeeping going on by HP fans of like, hey, fantasy, YA fantasy is our domain. Like, what is this? So there was a lot of like hate from kind of, Potterheads like myself. But in the real world, I feel like I don't know anybody that actually like read it. I like saw, if you went into Borders, you saw the huge displays. I knew it was going on, but I didn't engage with it at all.
Yeah. And you keep dating yourself every time you use the Borders reference because that company is completely out of business now.
Yeah. I just love Borders, man. I like Barnes and Noble now too, but I loved Borders back in the day. But they like really leaned into all that like midnight release stuff. And they were big with trying to attract young people to read. And that's where I found, Hunger Games back in the day. And they were really pushing Twilight too. And this was a phenomenon. Like, it was massive. I don't know if the legacy has like stood the test of time. Like, I feel like it has faded, but that could also just be that I'm not a young adult anymore. So I have no idea how people today view this franchise. Do you have any insight?
I have no insight into what the kids are saying, but I know the next question is, how do we feel about the novel Twilight? And I feel like I'm just going to go into that because
please.
This was very much written as like a high school romance, that immediate, you're head over heels, you're going to spend the rest of your life with somebody, I would die without you, those typical high school feelings.
Yeah. Can I ask you before you say how you felt, I would like to hear too, what were your expectations and then how you felt?
I think my expectations were that this was going to make me feel a little bit uncomfortable, to be honest.
Yeah.
I felt like we were going into a high school romance, and I just remember how awkward everybody's high school romance was.
Yeah.
And I figured this was going to be like 200 pages of just not great. And it met my expectations.
Yeah.
Because it, like, Twilight works if you put like zero critical thought into it.
Mm-hmm.
And here's my problem with the mid 2000s in general, is that in fantasy there was this weird fetishization of mythical creatures such as vampires, werewolves, and the Fae. And all of those creatures live to be hundreds, if not thousands of years old.
Yeah.
And so Edward is 97 in this book, and Bella is 16.
Yeah.
And I don't know when the last time you spoke to a high schooler was, or even someone in college, but like, just from like an emotional growth standpoint, like, it's kind of awkward sometimes.
Yeah.
And so to fall in love with a high schooler in this way was really strange for me.
I have mixed feelings on this because on one hand, I feel like this is a common theme in fantasy and at least maybe vampire lore. And I definitely had the feelings of this is uncomfortable to read. And, she is a minor, but I was having the feeling of like, is this any different? And I say this as a person who likes Marvel movies. I have Guardians of the Galaxy vinyl above my head right now. Is this any different than a Marvel movie? Like, is this any different than Thor being in love with Natalie Portman? Thor is probably thousands of years older than her. Is this any different than Arwen falling in love with Aragorn? Or me playing Mass Effect and, the one alien on the ship, who wants to be with Shepard, me as the captain. And I'm like, I kind of just like hand wave a lot of the age, maybe gap. Maybe I wouldn't say like the under 18, I don't hand wave that, but like the gap stuff, I kind of just hand wave when you get into a fantasy novel. Like the 16 is like very odd and uncomfortable. But like when I feel like I'm stepping into something like this, I'm like, whatever, it's fake. Like there's things that I like where I like don't put that type of analysis on it because it's made for me, or at least, when I was growing up, it was made for me, a boy, to enjoy, so what do I care?
Yeah, but the difference there is they were all adults. And the three examples you named, because even Natalie Portman was a PhD student in her mid-20s. And I think, to your point, it's the fact that she's a child that is the difference there. And it's an important distinction.
Yeah. But no, I agree. Yeah, I wasn't sure if you were saying like you didn't like the fantasy of like humans being in love with non-human creatures, and you didn't like the minor stuff, which I agree. Like,
no, it only doesn't
having
work
someone
for me
who's
when
like,
they're that young.
Yeah, no,
like when they're children, it's weird for me.
Yeah, it's deeply uncomfortable to read.
Yeah, but what I don't know how old Aragorn was there, but he was old.
Yeah,
Natalie Portman was the youngest example you use, and she's, I believe, like 26 or 27 in that.
Yeah,
like her characters in that movie. So yeah, but anyway, What did you think? What did you think of the fantasy in the book?
I mean, well, let me start off with my thoughts. I went into this, I'll be honest, with a very open mind. I really did. Like I knew very little. I knew that Bella was a character. I knew Edward was a character, and I knew Jacob was a character, and I knew that Edward was a vampire, and I knew that Jacob was a werewolf. That doesn't happen in the first one, so I'm just assuming that happens in these later books. And I got into this a few chapters in, and I was like, wow, the hate is so overblown for this. Like the pedestal that this was put on to be like the greatest thing in the world and also the worst thing in the world. I'm like, this is just internet edgelords being so dramatic about a story that was written for like young girls. Like,
yeah,
like get a life, honestly. I was like, it's just a trashy romance novel. And I don't say trashy in like a negative connotation. It's like we all enjoy some form of trash in our life. I mean that more of just like empty calories. This is empty calories. And all that to say, though, this is a completely unenjoyable experience for me, reading the book. I mean, I think she's a really poor writer. I think there's so many unnecessary details, in this book. I found the characters to be like the dullest of dull in terms of like cardboard with no development. And the climax of this is like kind of laughable. But at the end of the day, like it doesn't really all matter. Like I feel like as I think about this, I feel like I have like kind of that angel and the devil on my shoulder, and I'm trying to be self-aware, like who cares about this book because it's not for me. Like I'm not going to overanalyze and screech about something that was written for young girls. Like what do I care?
Yeah.
And like overanalyze that. So I don't think I'm going to go like as scorched earth as you might think. But I can't emphasize this enough. Like this book just really sucks. Like, it's just really bad. And I can see why it's comfort food for some. And it's just like so funny that like none of this is written with any irony. Like this is a deadly serious book. And it just feels like, this might be mean, but it just feels like emotional porn for sheltered people who have no idea what a healthy relationship is like. Like it's just like, or just like young people who just like haven't been in a real relationship yet. Like that's kind of what it feels like.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you because I mean, I don't quite understand the timeline. It didn't feel very clear, but she went from this guy's a creep, why do you hate me, to I don't want to spend a minute apart from you in like 6 pages.
Yeah, they went hot and heavy pretty quick. And I don't know, but like you talked about, you felt uncomfortable reading about high school love. And
not uncomfortable reading about high school love. Uncomfortable about there being an 81-year age gap for one high schooler to love somebody else.
Yeah. Well, I mean, let's be clear. Like, as an adult, when you think about young love and you think about your own relationships you had as a kid, like they're cringy and you
for sure
fall in love fast. So like this book is cringy. Like it should only be cringy on Bella's part, but it's extremely cringy for a person who's lived 100 years or, whatever. On Edward's part, it's just tough. Like it's really hard to like enjoy this as an adult. And in a serious way.
Yeah. You know what else I've put a lot of thought into?
Yeah.
Like way more than I should have.
Mm-hmm.
Edward doesn't sleep.
Yeah.
So like, let's fast forward like to 15 years. They're our age. In a relationship. Bella's got to sleep every night. Does Edward have to just like lay there with her the whole time? You know what I mean? Like, is he just like laying there with his arm around her and he's wide awake just thinking about like the latest episode of Lost or something? Or like, what is what is Edward doing the whole time Bella's sleeping other than watching her?
Because I have 2 thoughts there. Never in my life would I think I'm discussing the ins and outs of the lore of Twilight, but here we are. I don't know enough about vampire mythology. I was wondering where does the coffin fit in for sleeping? Because I thought they slept in a coffin, but I don't know how that works. Maybe that wouldn't be attractive enough for Edward to do that. But two, I think that the lore canon explanation would be, and I think he said some effect of this, is that his lifespan is so long that the overnight sleep aspect is a blip in his life. It is so short because of the time span that he lives on. So him waiting for her to wake up every day, for us, would feel excruciatingly long if I had to lay there awake for 8 hours every night. For him, that's 10 minutes.
That's a fair point.
So checkmate, Edward's okay there. How much fantasy were you expecting in this as you got into this? Were you expecting more or less about right?
I don't really understand the question, because to me, like, the fact that it's a world in which a vampire main character is there.
Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty much fantasy the whole time. Like, everything to do with Edward is fantasy, really.
But I'd say there's no fantastical elements outside of, it's like, and this is what Meyer does, it's like she just tells you he's a vampire, but gives no show for all he does is he saves her from that car, and that's like it.
I mean, he throws that tree, and they do have the whole like super fast running. Yeah. And then there is the probably greatest baseball scene of all time.
Yeah.
Coming from a baseball player who's watched real baseball and fake baseball, this is the best I've ever seen.
It's kind of like Slugfest, if you remember that game on PlayStation 2.
It might be more ridiculous than Slugfest, if that's possible.
Yeah.
And there's the whole like super fast running. There's the whole vampire fighting at the end. I don't know. I guess what were you expecting that you didn't get from the book in terms of like a fantasy element?
Yeah, I guess I said this is like, I know it's not on a spectrum. I said this when we talked the other day. I was like, but if there's one end of the spectrum that's fantasy and one end that's romance, the point of this novel is going to be somewhere in the middle. And I just didn't realize how much it leaned. The purpose of the story is romance, as opposed to the purpose of the story is about vampires or the fantastical elements. Like, there's no real investment in the world building of the vampire side of this. It's just like Edward could almost be just an attractive dude in high school and not be a vampire, and like not much really changes. And that's fine. Like, that's not I'm not saying I expected more fantasy as a criticism of this. I was so surprised, especially as like this was always talked about in the same conversation with the other like YA fantasy novels of the day, which usually lean very fantasy. I'm thinking like a Percy Jackson or like a Harry Potter. So I just expected more, and I'm not mad there wasn't or anything, or I'm not mad over Twilight at all, but I'm not upset that there wasn't. I was like, oh, this is truly just them falling in love over nearly 600 pages.
It's that long of a physical book.
Yeah, I think like the paperback is like 550 some pages.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Trust me. Counted every single one of them.
Yeah, you did.
I mentioned as I was talking about it that when I got into it, I was thinking that the hate was overblown. Like, did you find the setup, like, were you interested, like, as you got into the story? Because I was, honestly.
Yeah, in the setup, I'm going to refer to like the first 2 or 3 chapters.
Yeah.
I think it was fine. Like, it was the same setup that really especially any like trilogy would have. You need to set location, characters, whatever. I was like, okay, I had the same thoughts. I was like, I wonder where this is going. That, like, when does this turn to like where the internet hated it.
Yeah.
And then you texted me about chapter 4. And I was like, oh, got it. Okay. But no, I thought it was fine. I mean, what are you supposed to do in a brand new book in a fantasy element where you're setting up new things? You need to set the scene. You need to set the characters. It was fine.
Yeah. I was like, you're reading about, classic trope of like the child who's kind of the adult in the dynamic with her mom, and she's deciding to move back to Washington to be with her dad. She's going to be in a new school, and, kind of all of that familial setup. I was kind of interested in where this was going, and that was probably because I liked Charlie as a character. And I almost liked the dynamic that him and Bella had as like, it was probably the most normal and enjoyable aspect of the book. So I was really liking that. And then, Edward comes in and we start chapter 4 and 5, and it gets tough. It gets really hard to read through or just understand that I'm spending the next now 400 pages, 20 chapters, really just reading about them lusting after each other.
Yeah. And I think for me, if we had done a little bit less of that and a little bit more of exploring the relationship between Bella and her father and having some development there, like character development there, that would have been really interesting, because I think that was set up really well with no follow through.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, absolutely no follow through, other than like she has to hurt her dad at the end to get her to be able to leave Forks, or like have an explanation for leaving Forks, but there's like no closure to it.
Yeah, well, so okay, I want to talk about that. It sets up that they have this strained relationship. He doesn't really know her. He hasn't spent much time with her because she's moved to Phoenix, Arizona, right? She's coming back. And you can tell that there's a lot of tension in the beginning. Then there's like very small moments throughout the book throughout Twilight, where there's some tension between Charlie and Bella. And then there's this climactic event where Bella has to hurt him, Charlie. But I don't think that the middle bits did enough to show any growth in that relationship for that to have very much meaning that she made that comment.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I hear you. I was reading, some others' thoughts on this, as I would tell you, I was doing like sleuthing for like further on. And I think some of the biggest issues people seem to have with this checks out even in the first book, is you could read, a few lines from a character in chapter 2 of this book and read the 4th book, and there's been no change in that character. Like they're the same exact person who's had no growth. These events have altered them in no way. And that kind of feels, even in a microcosm like this first one, is that this story ends and every major character is kind of just in the same boat emotionally that they were at the start. Like nothing's different.
Yeah. And I do think that's a fair criticism of the book of Twilight.
Yeah. I had a few things that I found just plain dumb or bothered me.
Okay.
I want to hit you with them. I want to hear any things that you kind of pointed out or had. I just didn't understand why a defining personality trait of Bella was that she just like legit could not walk or run. Like there were multiple scenes discussing her at gym where she said, I played basketball that day, which meant I ended up falling down multiple times and had bruises on. Like, can you walk? Like, are you a toddler? I don't understand this personality. Like clumsy, sure. But every time there's something physical talked about, it's like she just falls over when she's walking and running. Like normal people in high school, that doesn't happen to them. I was just perplexing.
Yeah, it felt like maybe Stephanie Meyer was getting some lingering frustrations about maybe some unathleticism out, or like wanted Bella to be unathletic to make Edward seem that much more appealing, because being a vampire, you have such great senses. I don't know, but I felt like one of those scenes would have been fine. But once we got to the 5th time she's in gym class, I'm like, what are we doing here?
Yeah, it just felt like the entire book felt like it was written by someone who got notes from like their middle school English teacher on like how to make their story better, where it's like, well, if Edward is going to have to keep telling her to be safe and be worried about her and be protective, that means that she needs to be clumsy. So how am I going to show she's clumsy? Okay, we'll have her fall over in gym class all the time. It's just like, I don't know. I was like, oh my God, give me a break. I also got really tired of the crooked smile description of Edward, which was probably said, I don't know, realistically, non-hyperbole, probably at least 150 times. And I'm just we just need some new
descriptions. He smiled
a lot. Any things that stuck out to you that bothered you?
No. Because, I mean, you probably hit the one with the other thing is how maybe I would add that at least non-hyperbolic 25 times Edward makes a comment like, are you scared of me? Do you know how dangerous I am?
Yeah. I'm like, hold on to that for best quotes of the movie. Yeah, there's some dynamite ones. The one I was saddest that didn't make it to the movie in this book was when Bella says at lunch to Jessica, I believe, that she couldn't eat because her stomach was already full of butterflies thinking about Edward. I'm pretty sure I let out a legit oh brother at 10 p.m. at night reading this in bed. There's so many times I would listen to this on my walk in the morning to the coffee shop, and I would just have to turn the audiobook off and listen to some music because I'm like, I just need a break from this.
Or the other thing that I think about when I think about Twilight is Edward has this secret.
Yeah.
That would bring down everyone he cares about.
Yeah.
And he does almost nothing to hide it from Bella. Nothing. I mean, literally nothing. From chapter 4 on, he's like, do you know my secret? Do you know what I am? Do you know why I'm so dangerous and cool and badass and whatever? I'm like, you might want to think about this before you tell a 16-year-old. Because if there's one thing high schoolers live for, it's the gossip.
Yeah. And
having a vampire boyfriend seems like the gossip in small town Forks, Washington.
Yeah, it does. Like, is really high school your best avenue to like be undercover?
Why not college?
Probably not.
You can go to college forever.
Yeah. I think some of the book canon is that they start in high school, they go through to graduation, then they go to college for 4 years, and then they repeat the cycle and go back and start again as a freshman at another high. I think that's what's going on here. But yeah, high school's not where you want to be for this. I just don't get it, Nick. I don't get these dynamics.
They being the vampires. The vampire clan in Twilight misses so much school.
Mm-hmm.
And when you make it high school attendance is tracked. It's mandatory.
Yeah. You don't
get to miss that many days and like keep moving on.
Yeah. I felt like some of those aspects, I was reading this and like, again, like there's a part of me that's just like, who cares? This is not for me, like whatever. But I was like, is this how actual small towns work? Like that, she shows up here and everyone is like infatuated with her and is like waiting for her to arrive to this town. And it's like, oh, you're the chief. I have never known once in my life who the chief of police is in wherever I'm living. Not once. And I'm like, and everyone in this town is just like waiting for her and everyone is in love with her. And to your comment about Mayer putting a little bit of herself maybe in the athletics, I'm also thinking, look, if my family or fantasy is that I want to be John Wick and go, on a tour of vengeance, like, what do I care if this author's fantasy is she wants to go back to high school and have everyone be in love with her? Do I think it's weird? Yeah, whatever. But that's what it is. Like, who cares?
Not my circus.
Yeah, yeah. Should we move on to the movie?
Yeah.
You got anything else on the book you want to talk about?
No. No.
We'll cut it off there. I'm ready to talk about this movie.
Yeah. I think the background is pretty interesting on this one.
Yeah.
And if you don't mind, I'm going to steal your thunder a little bit here.
Do it. I'd love it.
The movie came out in 2008. The book came out in 2005, which means this book came out and they decided pretty quickly that they were making this a movie.
Yeah. What year did the second book come out? Do you know that? Is that Breaking Dawn?
But let me look it up.
I hate, as you're looking this up, just going to say, I feel like a sicko that there's a part of me that is like, man, I need to go watch the Breaking Dawn movie. Just see what happens here.
Okay, so the second book came out on August 21st, 2006.
Okay. Oh, wow. That was a quick turnaround.
Yeah.
So 2 books were out before the first movie came out.
I mean, probably the third book at this point. If they're doing a book a year, book 3 comes out in 2007. But I don't think this movie comes out in 2008 unless they started in 2006. So maybe the second book had come out by the time this went to production. I mean, that was fast.
Yeah. Yeah. Calypso came out in 2007. So she had the, oh, sorry, I got these titles wrong. New Moon is the second one. Breaking Dawn is the fourth one. Eclipse is the third. So she had, Breaking Dawn came out in 2008. So she almost had out this entire series before they did the first movie.
Well, before it was released.
Yeah, I'm sure they started pre-production in probably late 2006, early 2007.
I don't know, because this had a lot of CGI. I feel like this, I don't have anything to support this, but I feel like this probably took a little bit in post.
I don't know. I don't feel like there was really that much CGI in it. I mean, it was not that big of a budget, so they didn't have a ton of. I don't know. This is saying, I guess this was bought as a manuscript in 2004 with the idea to make this an adaptation already then. Wow. Surprising. So maybe they waited to see if it was a hit.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there was meetings in 2006 taking place that they believe that this could be a big potential in terms of a YA movie adaptation.
Okay. I mean, want to talk about big potential. There's a $35 million budget and it did $407 million at the box office.
Yeah.
I mean, even if you double $35 million to get, your marketing budget, that's still 407 on 70 million total. And that's just box office. That doesn't include all, that was a time when DVDs came out, all of the merch that goes with it, all of the licensing and royalties on that. I mean, this had to have been a $1.5 billion franchise when you add all 4 movies plus everything else they did.
Yeah, easy. Yeah, I assume, if I were to guess, there was probably, I feel like, and this is just kid brain, not really kid brain, but high school brain, because we're not as into this anymore. I assume it kind of peaked maybe around the third movie in terms of box office, I'd say. And then I think they split the last book into 2 movies because everyone was doing that at the time. Deathly Hallows Part 1 and Part 2, Mockingjay Part 1 and Part 2. I could see those 2 not doing as high. But yeah, I mean, 407 million worldwide, on a young adult romance novel. It's pretty crazy. This is a hit. I mean, this took over the world for a bit, no doubt about it. And it was either the type of thing that you saw it or you avoided it, probably like we did. At least I did back then.
I don't even know if I avoided it as much as it, like I said earlier, it just never was in my bubble.
Yeah.
Like I didn't actively try not to see Twilight.
Yeah.
At the time.
Yeah. What I was shocked about was that it was directed by Catherine Hardwicke, who directed Lords of Dogtown. I love that movie.
It's an awesome movie.
Big fan. Did she pull out the same punches in Twilight that she did for this? Not intentionally. I was looking at the I always look at kind of like the writing credits and who did the screenplay and stuff. The writer for this movie had one other. She's only written the Twilight franchise. The only other movie she's written was Step Up. I was like, that checks out.
Hey, Step Up is a classic.
I was like, oh, weird. The screenwriter for Twilight has never gotten another job in Hollywood writing a movie. Anything else you have on background you wanted to talk about?
No, give me your high level thoughts. Tell me, what did you love about this movie?
This is I want to get drunk to this movie. I thought that this was like an amazing car crash that I just had a blast watch. I was sitting on the couch yesterday, kind of post-Christmas vibes. I'm full of cheese. I'm full of wine. Don't really know what day of the week it is. I threw this on. I had a blast. It was so unintentionally funny. And I'm also bringing all the baggage in of, I know how serious Stephanie Meyer and the director took this, and I know how unserious every other actor in this movie took this and felt about it. I had so much fun watching this. Like, it was so bad it's good. What was your first experience like?
No, I mean, I texted you during this that I was having a blast watching it. I was laughing out loud. The funniest thing for me was that they took Edward from this like crazy sex appeal to like creepy constipated stalker.
Yeah.
And the way Robert Pattinson looks at her when they're at the lab table in high school biology,
unbelievable,
might be the funniest bit of physical comedy I've seen since Jim Carrey's The Grinch, which I realize has been like 2 weeks, so maybe that's bad. Yeah. But those are like my 1 and 2 of the year, is what I'm trying to say. Like Jim Carrey is The Grinch, perfect physical comedy. Robert Pattinson as Edward is like my second best bit of physical comedy.
Yeah, he has so many interviews since then where he talks about he was like begging for more script notes on Edward and how he should be playing the character. And every time he asked for more context into the backstory about Edward, the only answer he was getting was, he's perfect. He's perfect. He's perfect. So eventually Robert Pattinson was like, I just said, fuck it. I'm just going to play this as, you know, a manic depressive and be a complete creep towards Bella. And he's like, that's what I did. I was like, that's what you see.
That's exactly what we got out of that performance.
Yeah. I mean, it just feels like there is an insurmountable pit for this movie to climb out of with the source material. Like you're not starting, most of the time when you're making an adaptation, you're 40 steps ahead. You've got the source material down, you've got characterization, you've got world building. This novel set this movie so far back in terms of what it had to do. And oh my God, it was hilarious. It was so good.
I will say there is one thing that jumped out at me where the movie actually did it worse than the book. And that was when Edward and Bella are in the cafeteria and they're talking about what Edward could be. It's before she knows he's a vampire. And in the book, there's this bit about her, you know, thinking about like Spider-Man, Superman, like probably what you would
Yeah.
think about if you're, a teenager. And it was kind of funny in the book and like tongue-in-cheek humor. And then they tried to pull that into the movie and they cut out like half of the dialogue and it just made it weird and uncomfortable. And like, what are we doing here?
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't have too much of an issue for that, but maybe by the time I was watching the movie, I was probably just glossing over that. I was like, I think I was just happy to be done reading or listening to this, that I was just strapped in and I was like, this is just 2 hours of my life, this movie. I can handle that. I don't have to listen to an 8 or 9 hour audiobook, on this. Man, too, like the opening, I'm not always anti voiceover, but the source material and the way Meyer like rolls out world building is just so ham-fisted in the novel that like it felt like the only way they could do that was by a voiceover in this movie. And I was just like, it was just like nauseating. I was like, oh no, this is what we're going to be doing. We're going to be having Bella monologues.
I've said it on this podcast a million times. The best way to make a movie is to tell me. Don't show me. Don't have any nuance or anything clever. Just tell me. Just tell voice over the whole movie. Brady, how many times have I said it on this podcast? Tell me, don't show me. That is movie making 101.
It's so bad. And this is so relevant because did you see the recent article that has just come out that Netflix executives are giving notes to screenwriters right now that they want characters in Netflix shows and movies to announce what they are doing for people who are watching things in the background or not really paying attention or on their phone. So like we are moving towards your ideal world of let's just tell. We don't need to show.
I'm going to throw up. I'm going to be sick. This is awful.
Like
I did not see that and I'm glad I didn't.
Yeah, I'm just like, ugh. It's so tough. But that concept is just so foreign to the people who wrote this movie. And Stephanie Meyer, it's bad. It's like really bad. But I also had the feeling of like, we were talking about the boom of this and this movie, and maybe it's just a product of its time. And this is kind of like a little bit of a chicken and egg conversation, but it feels like they just struck gold at the right time. Middle of the YA boom. This is coming out. Also in a time where like, I don't know if there are like still like emo goth kids, and I don't interact with middle school and high schoolers. But that was a big thing when we were in school. Like the scene kids, it was a big deal.
I think they call them scene kids now.
Kids now. There's just like, it was a time for like moodiness and angstiness. And I think that this movie just came out at the perfect time to really blow up with all of those things. I mean, the color palette of this is so like depressive blue that it's pitch perfect. Like they just nailed it.
Like a reference? Is that a reference to the movie Pitch Perfect? With Anna Kendrick, who's also in this movie?
Yeah.
Which I had no idea of until she was on screen.
No, none at all.
Yeah, no, but you're right. Like the moodiness, like this movie is so My Chemical Romance.
Yeah.
That it had to have come out in 2008.
Mm-hmm.
I'm surprised we didn't see MCR on the soundtrack, to be honest.
Yeah.
Instead, we got this
weird. Some of the soundtrack songs I liked a lot.
Maybe, but that one, that weird hua hua song or whatever, was not it for me.
Yeah. What scene was that during? Do you remember?
A lot of them. It was a recurring soundtrack.
Not once. Yeah. What was, we were talking about that with the Grinch, where there's kind of like, they take a theme of the movie and they chop it up and do it in different ways throughout. So that didn't work for you here.
No.
No.
Any more thoughts before we get into I think we got to talk about casting here.
Yeah,
Who's in
I'm
it.
kind of ready to talk about casting. And I don't know if we start meta first on like how we feel about Pattinson and Stewart. And like also, I mean, just the young cast in general are still very much in our lives these days.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Which is crazy because it's been 16 years.
That's depressing now that you say that out loud. Yeah.
We would be Bella's age. We were born when the movie
just came out. Yeah, oh my God, that makes this relationship even worse.
You see?
Yeah.
But there's 3 people in this movie that have had just fantastic Hollywood careers since this came out. And that is the 2 leads being Robert Pattinson and Kristen Stewart and Anna Kendrick. And even some of the others you would see periodically for, that kind of came out of this. But those 3 in particular have not only lasted, have thrived since this movie came out.
Yeah, it's the type of situation where I think none of Pattinson and Stewart, I don't know how Kendrick has talked about this because I didn't even know she was in it. I had no idea, had none. They have not only extremely distanced themselves in the years, but they've really looked down upon their work in here in kind of a fun way. They're not like a total rejection of their upbringing, but just like, yeah, I was, in a really bad movie and I was young and didn't know what I was doing. But they both have done a great job of just like reinventing their careers since then, because they had it pretty rough. Like even as this came out, there was like a lot of poking fun at Twilight and at Kristen Stewart's, sort of acting in this, and even just the way you were talking about that scene with Edward and Pattinson's, kind of acting. But they've really turned themselves around in terms of like what they put out now. And I think that making a ton of money from these movies probably gave them the financial flexibility to make more creative, interesting choices. And I'm really excited. We're covering Mickey 17 later this year. Can't wait for that. That's an amazing movie. Or a potentially amazing movie that Pattinson is doing. I think about his performances in The Lighthouse, in, the Batman movie that came out. He's, really good. Kristen Stewart, Love Lies Bleeding, that came out this year. Huge fan of this movie. So I just can't believe the turnaround we've had in those 2.
I gotta be honest. I don't even know if I would call it a turnaround in terms of their act. Like, I didn't have a problem with any of the acting in this movie. I actually thought it was acted pretty well. I just think they had nothing to work with. Like, the script was bad, but like the performers themselves, I think, did about as good of a job as you could do with that.
Yeah, or at least I think turn around like public perception.
Yeah,
least.
okay, that's fair.
Yeah, which is just like night and day.
Public perception, you're definitely right.
Yeah, and who would have thought? Like, I don't know. You look at, if you continue to make a comp to sort of like the HP franchise, Daniel Radcliffe is doing similar things of trying to distance himself and do other type of roles, but none of those 3, between him, Emma Watson, and Rupert Grint, have had nearly the success or interesting choices that Anna Kendrick, Robert Pattinson, and Kristen Stewart have had. And I'm a big fan of all 3.
Yeah, Emma is probably the best example there, because at least she's got some other big things like Beauty and the Beast, and she's been in a few other movies. But yeah, you're right. And even if you look at the Hunger Games, Jennifer Lawrence is the obvious example there, but outside of her, the people that weren't already known going into the Hunger Games, of the new, it's really just her. Like, Twilight probably has, in sheer numbers, the most that have gone on to have long-lasting, successful careers.
Yeah, of the kid cast for sure.
Yeah. I mean, if you're looking at
Yeah.
the Hunger Games and everybody who was established going into that
Totally.
movie, I mean, that's not even a fair comparison
Yeah.
because the Hunger Games had everybody who was anybody at that time.
Yeah, I agree though. Yeah, I mean Jennifer Lawrence is probably the kind of the king of the mountain right now in terms of actors that have come out of the YA boom, just because she's won Oscars. She's been in huge blockbusters. She's done it all. But I think Pattinson is right on her heels. Right on her heels. I mean, Anna Kendrick this year directed a movie, her first movie. That was a pretty good movie for a first outing as a director. Like, really good.
Yeah.
So it was fun for me as a real fan of all three of those to finally sit down and watch this and see their performances in it. Like, it was a really good time.
Yeah. I mean, and I guess with that good time, I know one of the things we discussed covering was best scenes. Anything you want to cover before we go down our list of favorite scenes and talk about those?
No, because I think anything we'll want to talk about with like some of the specifics of what, you know, Pattinson or Stewart or even some of these side characters are doing will come out in these scenes. So I'm thinking the way we do this is let's just alternate, you know, as chronological as we can, because I know there's some scenes you want to talk about and kind of shoot back and forth on some of our favorite stuff. Do you want to lead it off here, or do you want me to?
I don't think we need to talk about Edward meeting Bella at the bio table any more than we have, because that would be number one. So then my second one would be the scene where Dr. Cullen first makes an appearance in the hospital and he pushes the door open and he comes strutting in like he's all that, and just he's like, hey, look at me, I'm awesome, look how sexy I am, I'm the doctor. And I was dying watching that scene.
Yeah, I don't know whose note it was on this movie, if this was the cinematographer's choice, that every vampire introduction included slow-mo. But whoever gave that note, you're the next Roger Deakins, buddy, whoever you are out there. Because it happens
so
even
funny.
You know, even before we have the infamous science class meeting, like when you first see the Colons walking outside, you know, they're kind of, the camera slows down and they're walking.
They've all got the like sex eyes going.
Yeah. Oh my God. It's just so bad. But yeah, the hospital visit, I mean, just everything Edward and the vampires are doing in these first 20 minutes leading up to that hospital is just so amazing. The next one I throw out at you is oh my God, when they go to La Push and Jacob is giving like the story of the clans, and it's doing like this, like it's telling the narrative through like this like all sepia looking scene.
Yeah.
And there's just like one shot of where he's talking about them he's not saying they're vampires, but he's giving vague descriptions, and it's just like all of Edward's family and the vampires like standing over a body they just killed, like looking menacing but sexy at the camera. It's like, it was just so bad. It was like, I think of the great scenes where someone is telling sort of like, you know, a historical story like that, or they're telling something that happened in the past and it cuts away to it. And this was done to just, I mean, they probably thought this was amazing. And let me tell you, it was.
They ate. They
What
ate
else?
with that one.
Yeah. What's your next one?
Every scene that had that hua hua song, just that was just the funniest.
I need to go rewatch this already.
I will say, I know we're making fun of these scenes right now, but there are a couple scenes that I thought really worked, and they were the scenes where we met the other vampire clan before the baseball scene. And I think the movie did a much better job of building up the threat
Yeah.
of this impending battle at the end. Because in the book, it
Mhm.
feels a little random. They show up and then boom, you're off.
Yeah.
Whereas here, you understand the stakes going into that meeting and you realize what's going on. And they did it in a cool way where like you don't actually see them and then you kind of see them and then you meet them.
Mhm.
And I actually thought that was a good piece of cinema, like storytelling from a cinema standpoint.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's the main improvement over the book, which I mean, I think the movie as a whole is an improvement because it's just fun. Where the book is just a dreadful experience, and it made any sense of stakes in this movie because as you're reading it, like the entire time, I'm just like the only thing this is driving towards, and the only reason you'd be hanging on every word as a kid reading this is because you want to see Bella and Edward eventually get together. For me, that's not enough of a driver to have a good time. Where in the movie, they set up a little bit more intrigue, I would say, of there's these murders happening around town. And I agree. I really like that. I mean, were those scenes absolutely ridiculous of, you know, them hopping down on the boat and like killing people? Yes, like it looked bad. It was bad. The acting was bad, but it added more to the story.
It did.
Than you got in the book. My next scene is probably, this is maybe I'd call a sequence, and I think this is just the greatest stretch. That's tough because there's so much good coming up. Starting with the dinner scene, going through her realization to her confronting him on the mountaintop. I mean, just lights out, like absolutely lights out. There was one intentionally funny thing they did here where he's telling her at dinner that he can actually read minds and like confirming that for her. And she's like, well, what is everyone thinking about? And she looks at the one guy and he goes, that guy's thinking about his cats. And he's like all happy, like in the corner. Like, I thought that was a great part. But the cherry on top of all this sequence is when, oh my God, when he's like, what you mentioned earlier, he's like, oh, you know, Bella's like, I'm not scared of you. I'm not going to be afraid of me. And he's like, oh, you're not scared of me? Well, look at this. And he does like the quick run up the mountain and then stands in the sun and just glitters. And she's like, and she legitimately like gasps like she's now scared. I was like, what is happening? Like, this is how you prove that you're a menacing vampire, is by sparkling in the sun. I was like, oh my God. That whole stretch just lights out.
There was also, in the book, there was at least 2 pages of this, but in the movie, there was none, where Bella's just like immediately trusting of a vampire.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, oh, I'm a vampire. And she's like, that makes sense. Oh my God, I know. I love you.
Yeah.
I'm not scared. Let me be with a vampire.
Yeah. It's just questionable choices. I was even thinking about that, where she had this realization that he was a vampire, and her first instinct is to say, we need to go talk secluded in the woods right now.
Yep.
I have no protection.
I've always said it. That's another thing I've always said. When you want to have private conversations with dangerous people about their biggest secret, you should go somewhere where nobody can help you.
Defining characteristic is a chomp on humans. Yeah, let's get alone with them.
Yep.
What's your next scene? I know where you want to go.
I'm going.
Visit the Colons.
We gotta talk about this baseball scene. I will preface this by saying the scene was not as bad as I thought it was going to be based on all the people making fun of it and the clips I've seen or whatever. However, I don't understand why we chose baseball. And I don't understand why we put no effort into learning like baseball vernacular or how baseball actually looks or works. Or it was, and then in the movie when they did it, and it was all just like squinted eyes and weird crooked smiles, and then I just, my jaw was on the floor watching this scene, and I was like, and then these other vampires hear a game of baseball and they immediately know it's baseball and want to play, and that's like what vampires do now is play baseball.
Yeah. There's a surprising amount of baseball in this book because her mom's, new husband is also like a minor leaguer or something. And then we have this scene. So I'm like, Mayor, closet baseball head.
Yeah, well, but then she says things like, yeah, we're just going to hit long flies. And I'm like, that's
not how that works.
I think writers should have the freedom to write about things that they don't 100% know about or want to explore. But I do think they should Google it before they do that.
Yeah, it was, the scene hit me so weird because in my two experiences, in the book, I'm having this unpleasurable realization that, wow, everything is driving towards like this moment. Like this is the big inciting incident that is going to like propel us to the climax. And I'm like, this is just stupid. Like, it's just no other way to say it. It's just stupid.
Yeah.
But in the movie, I'm like prepared for it. And when I saw Love the Touch, that these vampires are like 100 years old and they're wearing like Babe Ruth type hats. Emmett has his on crooked. And I'm like, you just look like an idiot. like I don't know if they were going for cool, but did not pull it off. And yeah, like the fact that this baseball game is just their way to introduce the other vampire clan because they hit them so loud they create like thunderclaps. like I don't know how this idea came about in her mind, but I'm so glad it did because we got to see this scene. Especially when Alice is like, she walks up and she's like, I'm the one with the wicked curveball. And then the game like starts. I'm like, what are we doing? Like literally, what are we doing? And this was even the better vampire introduction scene when the other clan comes in and the guy is just slowly walking, full chest out, shirt totally unbuttoned. I'm like, this is incredible. Like, this is absolutely incredible. Anything else you want to mention on the baseball scene here?
No.
Is this where does this rank in your favorite sports scenes of all time?
1.
And like, why aren't they actually just, if I was a vampire, I would try and make it pro. Like, why not?
Because you can't play day games. Because you shine like a diamond.
That's true.
Shine bright like a diamond.
I don't know. Play for the Mariners and fake an injury every time you travel somewhere sunny. Play in a dome.
There's got to be minor league baseball in Alaska. It's like never sunny there.
I know. Only other scene I'll throw out to close this out. I mean, the end fight is like just as anticlimactic as it is in the book, except we're not getting the descriptions that she's thinking an angel is saving her, which is Edward, which is like another just audible groan, oh brother, from me as I'm reading. And it's so ridiculous. And then the fake out neck kiss at the end, it was like, I thought we had already hit the peak. I thought I was like, I'm maxed out on enjoyment of this movie. I have seen the science introduction. I have seen this ridiculous dinner scene. I've watched baseball scenes by someone who doesn't really know what baseball is. I'm good. And then we come in with the fake neck kiss. And I'm like, Catherine Hardwicke, you just, hats off. Stood up and applauded in my home. How'd you like the ending?
I was disappointed that it was over. I'll say that. I was enjoying myself.
Yeah. It was incredible. There was audio commentary of the movie.
Oh, you got the DVD extras
that Catherine Hardwicke was doing with Robert Pattinson and Kristen Stewart. And it was a little weird because they were young at the time. But Catherine Hardwicke is like watching the scene with them and she's like, oh my God, this is so hot and sexy, as like he's kissing her like neck in that scene.
I don't like that.
No. And they're both like kind of laughing and uncomfortable. And it's like, I don't know how old they were, but like a middle-aged woman, like getting a little hot and bothered over these two high school teenagers, or I guess one of them is like 100, like real life teenagers. It's just weird. It's just so weird.
I don't like that. I don't like that at all, actually.
No. Like,
you could have kept that one to yourself. I didn't need to know that.
I think that is what makes this movie amazing, though, is it was so earnest from her standpoint and from the writer's standpoint. And it makes it a so bad it's good, because most unintentionally funny things are that they're unintentionally funny. And this killed it. Oh, man.
Anything else you want to cover on this?
We hit the kind of the things we like that they changed. You probably know this because you've Googled some more. So I do have one thing. What was up with kind of the shock, supposedly playing ending of Rosalie? Is that her name? The other vampire, where she's like watching them do the fake out neck kiss. And then she kind of looks angry and walks out of the room and starts walking down the stairs. And then they cut to the credits. Is Rosalie gonna have some future beef? Is she in love with Edward?
I think so.
And instead of a love triangle, we're gonna have a love stool. And you can take that both ways.
I think you're right. I don't actually know, but I'm pretty sure that she's in love with Edward.
Yeah, that's what I got from that. And I just love that that's, introducing that is where we really get excited at the end for the next installment. Speaking, though, of the credits, I was pretty pumped as a child, and now I love Paramore. And I always knew that the song Decode from them was from Twilight and written for Twilight. Pretty pissed off that it's like the third song that plays in the credits. But nonetheless, I was happy. I was hoping this was making like an in-movie appearance, but it didn't.
It didn't.
But that song is still great. Love Paramore. Hayley Williams is awesome.
Yeah.
Also, totally blank. Radiohead wrote an original song for this movie, which feels like the most un-Radiohead thing ever. But maybe
it's all about that paycheck,
or maybe one of their kids was like really into it, and they wanted to.
Don't know.
Who knows? But no, this movie was amazing. This is crazy. This may shock you. I was ranking this on Letterboxd. I gave this 2.5 out of 5, and I gave it the like heart because I was like, I think most people would expect me to probably give this like a 1 star or a 2 star, not even like it. I'm not gonna lie, because my fiance did not want to watch it yesterday with me. She's never seen it, and she's like, you can watch it before I get home. If she were to say to me tonight, hey, do you want to watch Twilight? I would probably be like, yeah, I kind of do. Like, not that bad. And like we said, it's a faithful adaptation. if I'm scoring this out of 25, I'm like, realistically, this is probably like a 12 out of 25. I will never read this book again. I will never, ever probably read future books. But if we were hanging out and you said, hey, Randy, you want to make some margaritas? You want to watch Twilight Eclipse? I'd probably be like, let's do it, buddy. Fire it up.
Careful what you wish for.
Yeah. What about you? How you ranking or rating this?
Yeah, I think I'd give it like a 14 out of 25. I do think it gets a lot of not a lot, but like in the faithfulness category,
It's so
full
faithful.
points. It's like beat for beat. So that was cool. I did enjoy it. As a standalone, it's whatever, but the legacy of it, I mean, you can't argue with the numbers. You can't argue with all the mania that went around it. So I'd give it a 14.
Yeah. That's fair. I know we're wrapping up here. I want to give quickly my favorite quotes because we talked about faithfulness. These were all pulled directly from the book.
Do it.
Loved it. So the lion fell in love with the lamb. Just that is like the type of thing that like a high school girl is just going to read and be like, wow, this is deep. Hold on, spider monkey, when Edward flies out of the house under the tree.
That's bad.
Every time the vampires run fast in this, it is so comical. It just cracks me up. The writing of in that science scene of when Bella says to Edward, "You don't even say hi to me," and he just goes, "Hi." It's like, you gotta be kidding me. And I don't know if this was intended to be funny, but if it was, this was like legit funny. It was when she goes over before the baseball game and they're cooking dinner for her. And someone says to, what's the mom's name? Something with an E. I don't know. She's like, is she even Italian? And the girl's like, her name is Bella. And I'm just like, this is gold. Like, oh my God. Like,
I do think that was intentionally a joke.
Yeah, that was
that was funny in the book too.
Yeah, I was cracking up. And it was also, they were making this Italian dinner with garlic. And I'm like, isn't rule 1 vampires are afraid of garlic? And we're making an Italian dinner? What are we doing? Oh my God. Just amazing stuff. Anything else you got to say on Twilight? Close out here on your B-Day?
No, that was, honestly, I enjoyed that way more than I thought I was going to. And I'm glad that you did get some enjoyment out of it, even if it was only for the movie portion of this adaptation.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd say that to anyone out there. If you haven't watched this movie, if you have avoided it all these years, just watch it. Go in knowing you're going to have fun with it, and you will have fun because it is hilarious.
Yeah. And to Randy's point, maybe make a margarita before and then one for during.
Yeah.
And have a picture ready for after.
Yeah.
When you talk about it with whoever you watched it with.
Oh, it's just, that's so good. Good to wrap up here then?
Yeah, let's do it. Hit the outro.
Yeah. Thanks for listening, everybody. And a heartfelt happy birthday to the Edward in my life. Next episode, I didn't even realize this when we planned this. We are sticking with the vampire theme. Mm-hmm. We were talking Nosferatu.
Very different vampire.
Very different vampire scene. I haven't seen the new movie yet. I'm really excited. I like Nicholas Hoult. I don't know if you watched your number 2. We were talking about this over text the other day. Yeah. I like Nicholas Hoult. So I'm excited. Did you end up getting to see the new Nosferatu yet?
I did.
Nice. Yeah, I'm excited. I think we're going to see it on Thursday. So I'm excited for that. It was just released over Christmas. I can't imagine how Nick's going to feel about me making him watch a 1922 silent film. So we'll see how that goes. If you have any thoughts, you can reach out to us via email, rewatchplaypod@gmail.com. You can message us on Instagram at rewatchplaypodcast. Thanks for listening, everyone. Again, happy birthday, Nick. Thank you for getting me to watch this movie, which was an experience I'll never forget in my life.
Anytime.
All right, take it easy, buddy.
All right.